So some of you may have already seen this picture from one's previous lecture sometime. Actually, this is essentially set of hypothesis, or called linguistic relativity. So in this picture, we show the language actually shapes the brain. So the brain will be different for different languages. Then the different brain will produce different perceptions, and different perceptions further reflected by different behaviors. So, okay, it's Wolf hypothesis. And we have quite a lot of methods to investigate this hypothesis. We can use behavioral studies. So usually we design a set of input stimuli. Then ask subject to do some task. We can obtain another set of output in terms of subject's responses. However, in between the input and output, usually this input is quite long, from several milliseconds to over 1,000 milliseconds, depends on the difficulty of the task. We don't know what brain is going during this interval. So it's a kind of black box. We just by examining the relationship between input and output, we guess how is the brain going. And now we're lucky that we will have quite a lot brain imaging techniques. With the help of such techniques, actually we can see how it's going inside the brain. For instance, here we listed some brain imaging techniques: EEG, MRI, MEG, and so on. So next slide, I will talk a little bit about EEG and MRI. And later on, Professor Lin will talk more about MRI. Okay, here is the basic principles of these brain imaging techniques. So give a task. Then we use our brain to think about the problem, to do the task. Without brain, we cannot do it. So the task induces some neural activities, right? And we know there are many neurons inside the brain, and the neuron fire and will also result in some bioelectric signals. With EEG technique, actually we can pick up such electric signals over scalp. So this is the principles behind EEG. And what about MRI? So neural activities result in metabolization, because the neuron firing requires, for instance, oxygen, and this signal can be further reflected as a blood signal, blood oxygen level dependent, and this signal can be picked up by fMRI. So anyway, these techniques can examine the brain functions, but all indirectly. So new activity through electrical signals they pick up by EEG, and the new activity cause changes for blood signal they pick up by fMRI. So there are some limits of such techniques. This is an MRI machine. So subjects lie on this bed and put into the scan, and this is the cap of EEG. This is about 128 channels. So you see lots of electrodes over the scalp. Okay, then I will talk about studies. First, I will talk about tone perception. And for person one's edit paper, we know many languages, such as Mandarin and Cantonese, we use pitch patterns to represent lexical meaning. For here, the same syllable, ma, with consonant m and vowel r, ma. Then, by use of different repeat patterns, for instance here, ma is high falling pitch pattern. Okay, the meaning is to scope. And with a rising pitch pattern, then ma means hand. And with a high level pitch pattern, ma, mother. And with first falling, then rising, a deepening tone, deepening pitch pattern is ma, horse. So this tone pattern is in Mandarin. And then if you also change the wow, me, also change the meaning. So anyway, you can see change the tones actually in the same way, change wow, also change the meaning of the syllable, right? So this is the tone. And then Professor Wan pioneered a study to see whether native tongue language speakers and the non-tongue language speakers perceive the pitch continuum in the same way or differently. So it constructs a continuum from a high level, like here use the syllable yi, aunt, and each step there are only very small changes, only by 3 hertz. You see, the ending point is the same. We fixed. They started with 105, then one more step 108, and 3 hertz again. And the highest one is high level. Okay, in this pitch pattern is perfect level. The meaning is changed from a typical yi to a typical yi close. Okay, then ask 2 group subjects to do an identification test and a discriminating test. For identification test, okay, randomly select one stimuli and play to the subjects. And subjects will instruct to identify which syllable can receive either yi or yi. So, and we can see physically from stimulus number 1 to stimulus number 11 is a linear change, each step 3 hertz. However, in perceptual domain, they are different. So you can treat the stimulus number 1 and the stimulus number 11 as 2 prototypes. And these two prototypes actually can attract the nearby stimuli toward them, kind of magnetic effect. And here we can see the result for these 2 group subjects. And then you see the left panel is for Mandarin subjects, and the right for English subjects, non-Chinese subjects. And for Mandarin subjects, you can see the transition is about something between 7 and 8 in this set of stimuli. It's quite sharp, right? Here you can see from stimuli number 6. Okay, this curve is a response curve for yi, because we know, okay, the stimuli number 1 is the steepest one, corresponding to yi, and the 11 is the perfect one, corresponding to yi, right? So this curve is the response, is the yi response, and the following one, this one is the yi response. Okay, this is quite sharp. In comparison to the non-Chinese subjects, you see, okay, the transition is not that sharp. Actually, we can do statistical analysis to test whether they are actually different. And we can see another curve, this curve. This curve is the discrimination curve. For many subjects, okay, there is a peak around the boundary position, this discrimination peak. And for non-Chinese the peak is at the very end. Because we know biologically, actually we can discriminate level versus long level. Okay, so we can see the stimuli, okay, this is the perfect level, then all others are long perfect level, right? So the long tone line speakers actually have the ability to discriminate the perfect level versus others. And we call such boundary psychophysical boundary. When trained with tone language, actually, this psychophysical boundary disappears. This boundary shifts to linguistic boundary. That is tone 1 versus tone 2 boundary in Mandarin here. Then we further look at whether different tone inventories influences tone perception. And we know Cantonese has a much rich tone inventory in comparison to Mandarin, right? Mandarin have 4 lexicons, while Cantonese, if you don't consider the duration, different duration, the Chinese syllables, then there are 6 long tones in Cantonese. So you can, from this figure, you can see it's much more crowded for the Cantonese tone system. We can further look at this figure. Okay, the dotted one is for the 3 checked tones, the short ones. Are the 6 long curves for the 6 Cantonese long tones. And this is for Mandarin for lexicons. And in both language or dialects, they share the high level tone, tone 1, with tone value 5-5. And a rising tone, 3-5 or 2-5. Mandarin also have the high rising tone. Okay. So the tone inventories of Mandarin and the Cantonese both include these 2 tones, high level pitch contour for the high level tone, and the high rising pitch contour for the high rising tone. So high level tone, high rising tone. And the following perseverance procedure will also create a continuum, which includes 11 stimuli, also starting from 105 Hertz to 135 Hertz. Then we actually recruit 3 groups of subjects to do the experiments. Native Mandarin speakers, native Cantonese speakers, and the native German speakers, the non-tone language group. And by statistical analysis, we found these 2 native tone language groups differ from this non-tone language group. And you can even see from the figure, actually the change for the German group is more continuous, right? Step by step. And for these 2 groups, Mandarin and Cantonese, the transition is more sharp. And statistically, there are no significant difference between the 2 tone language groups, Mandarin and Cantonese. And we can also see from the discrimination curves. Yeah. So we can examine 2 points. One is here, another is here. Previously, we know that non-tone language groups preserve the psychophysical boundary, right, at the very end. And here, for the German group, we repeat the result. The German group obtained the highest discrimination accuracy at the level end. This pair is the stimulus number 9 versus stimulus number 11. And interestingly, we can see the Cantonese group, the green line, also achieved quite high score at this point. What's the reason? We guess that may be due to the denser tone system of Cantonese. So Cantonese, in addition to the high resonant tone, Cantonese also has another resonant tone, the low resonant tone. Maybe the existence of the low resonant tone, the Cantonese should the relative high accuracy at this very end. And we are more interested with this point. Okay, we know both Cantonese and Mandarin have the contrast of a high level tone versus a high resonant tone. And these 2 points, the point here, no significant difference between the Mandarin group and the Cantonese group. Then we are thinking about more. Are really the Mandarin group and the Cantonese group deal with this tone contrast? I mean, high level versus high resonant. We ignore the no resonant one for Cantonese. Okay. Are the really processed the same way? So we know behaviorally we cannot tell the difference. Therefore, we have run EEG experiment to look at how brain processes this tone pairs by 2 groups of subjects, native Mandarin subjects versus native Cantonese subjects. So this is our EEG study. Because from our behavior study, we know the boundary for this set of stimuli, the boundary, okay, we can see here. The boundary for Mandarin is 5.4 or 0.5 something, and for Cantonese is 5.2, 0.3 something. But anyway, it is not a significant difference, so we treat that the same. Okay, so we know the boundary, categorical boundary is somewhere in between here. Then we choose 3 stimuli from this continuum. The stimulus, the number 1 stimuli, the typical resonant tone, and the stimuli number 4, another resonant tone. So it's not that typical, but still, you can see number 4 here. Over 80% of the time, actually, it is identified as a resonant tone. So the change between number 1 and number 4 is a within category change, right? The acoustically they're different, but phonologically they are both resonant tone. And we choose another stimulus, number 7. And the step from number 4 to number 7 is 1, 2, 3 steps, right? Okay. But this stimuli is identified as a level tone by most of the cases. You can see here again, number 7, right? Most of the cases actually is identified as a level tone. So from stimuli number 4 to stimuli number 7, although the phase distance is line curves, but phonologically they're different. So it is a cross-category change, right? And from stimuli number 4 to stimuli number 1 is also line curves change. So physically, the change from 4 to 7 is the same as from 4 to 1. But from 4 to 1 is the within category change. Okay. Then we use the Oddball paradigm to do experiments. What is Oddball? we insert the different. Here we have two different, right? We use stigma number 4 as standard, the most frequent occurring one. So here the standard is the stigma number 4. And the different, across category different is stigma number 7. The within category different is stimulus number 1. So the percentage of standards is about 80%, and each different is about 10%. So, and during the experiment, we ask the subject to press a button. Once they hear the Oddball, regardless of the types of Oddball. Okay, they hear the difference, then press the button. Then we look at the brain response. During the experiment, actually, we also recorded the subject's behavior response, because I asked the subject to press the button once they hear the difference. By statistical analysis, there are no significant difference in terms of the behavior response between these two group subjects. Then we look at the brain waves picked up by EEG. Okay, here the left panel is for Mandarin subjects. The right panel is for Cantonese subjects. And then we look at this. Okay, these are the three curves. The dashed line is the curve for the standard. And two other lines, the solid line is for within category different, and the dark dashed line is for across category different. So here, 3 ERPs. In order to look at the result more clearly, we use the difference wave here. Then this solid line is for the difference wave between the within category different versus standard. And the other one is the ERP between the cross-category different versus the standard. So anyway, this is the ERP by the difference between these two, and the black one is the difference between this one and that one. So this is called a difference wave. And we do the same thing for the Cantonese subjects. And okay, interestingly, for non-speech stimuli, we use two sets of stimuli, the speech stimuli and the non-speech stimuli. The non-speech stimuli, we use complex tones, which share the same F0 trajectories of the speech stimuli. Anyway, we didn't find any significant difference for the non-speech signal between the two groups of subjects. The interesting finding for this study is for speech stimuli. And we can see, we just look at a different wave. Okay. For Mandarin subjects, the ERP waves for these two types of difference, there are no significant difference. Although we can see some tiny difference here, the difference cannot reach significance. However, for Cantonese subjects, by eyeballing, we can see the difference is much more larger, right? And statistically, the two differences actually produced significant different ERPs. So this result summarized here. So no significant differences in P300 amplitude between within category and across category difference for non-speech stimuli were elicited for both Mandarin and Cantonese subjects. Then, significantly greater amplitude P300 responses were elicited for across category different than for within category different for speech stimuli, and only for Cantonese subjects, but not for many subjects. So then, based on this result, we give the following summary. Why it looks like that? So according to the context updating hypothesis, the P300 amplitude reflects the ease with which subjects update mental schema of stimulus context in response to changes in stimulus attitude. Because we use the Oddball paradigm, the standard stimulus occurred more frequently. And now and then there is a deviant. So once a deviant appears, then the subjects will update the context. And just based on this is not enough, because we know we use two types of deviants, right? Within category deviants and across category deviants. So this can only explain the deviant. The deviant will give different ARPs. And this, moreover, this research shows that the P300 component also indexes phonological processing. With P300 amplitude being greater for deviants that are perceived as phonologically distinct from standard. Yeah, we use two types of stimuli within category, across category. So for the across category deviants, in addition to the phonetic processing, there are some difference. The additional phonological processing. And then why these two group subjects differ from each other? Because only Cantonese subjects show this difference, Mandarin doesn't. So, taking this together, we think native Cantonese speakers are more sensitive in differentiating two types of difference. And this comes to our hypothesis, acoustic density hypothesis. Of course, we just test this hypothesis based on Mandarin subjects versus Cantonese subjects. We need more tests whether it is true. So this is for tone perception. Then we also look at category rating. We all know there are two change rating systems. There's simplified transit characters versus traditional characters. And the traditional characters are used in Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, etc. And simplified characters are used in Mainland China, Singapore, Malaysia, etc. And we also know there are many cases the same character, the form are different, right? For instance, the East, Dong, this is in traditional character, and this is in simplified character. So the shape are quite different. And however, a subset of characters have the same form in both systems. For instance, heart, stone. So that's the same. Then we use such shared characters for our experimental stimuli. I will show here. So we have construct 50 pairs of such stimuli. And you can see from this column, it is legal characters. Then by remove a stroke, so it is illegal, right? In both simplified system and the traditional system. No such character, right? So this is by remove a stroke. And then we do another construction by adding an additional stroke, also to obtain a known character, right? So you can see this construction. And here is two examples by removing a stroke, by adding a stroke. Then we ask the subject to do the following experiment. Of course, given enough time, I believe everyone can see the difference. This is the character, this is the non-character, right? Easy, no problem. Then we use a design in two ways. First, display the symbol. Why I use the symbol? Because it includes both legal characters and the long characters. So we use a symbol. The display time is very short, 50 milliseconds. So you can try with your own computer. If you display something about 50 milliseconds, what's the concept? And second, actually, the task is not a lesson design task. We use two distractors, two very simple distractors, the cross and the circle. It's easy to detect, symbols. Then we use a computer mask to reduce the visual residue. Okay, and subjects were instructed to identify the distractors. One button for cross, another button for the circle. So during the experiment, the EEG signals was picked up. And after the EEG experiment, we also asked the subject, in addition to these two distractors, what kind of symbols they have seen. Almost no one reported that they see some non-characters. So it seemed to them that the same, or some characters, just it. Because we attracted the attention to such distractors, and also by using very, very short display time. So consciously, they didn't notice the non-characters. Then we examine the brain responses of these two group subjects. So in terms of ERP, actually, there are significant difference in this time window. We call the P300 component. So the blue line is the ERP curve for those real characters. Another line is for the non-characters. So actually, the brain could tell the difference, even given very short display time. Then we divide the subject into Cantonese group and the Mandarin group. We can see. For native Mandarin group, actually is simplified transcript readers. Okay, the difference was larger. However, for the Cantonese group, the difference disappeared. So it means that the Mandarin group can differentiate the character versus non-character, but the Cantonese group cannot. At this time window, it's about the middle of this window is about 400 milliseconds. That means from the onset of stimuli, about 300 or 400 milliseconds, this group subject can tell the difference between the character versus non-character. And this group of subjects cannot tell the difference. So that in terms of the brain waves, they're different. Then this is a summary about this study. So we know simplified characters in general or averagely have fewer strokes on average than traditional characters. Everyone knows, right? Hence, the simplified characters comprise few visual features if we treat each stroke as a visual feature. And we also know from the literature, any simplified character readers must therefore develop stronger visual skills than any traditional Chinese readers to learn to read. Right? Because there are less visual features. So for details, you can look at this paper. And because we just test on the adult subjects, the university students, so we speculate that this strong skill extends into adulthood for the simplified Chinese character readers. So then, some of these studies, native German speakers produced behaviors which were typical for native non-tone language speakers in the tone perception experiments. And native Mandarin speakers produced Mandarin-style behaviors in tone perception experiment and the character reading experiments. Native Hong Kong Cantonese speakers produced the Cantonese-style behaviors in tone perception and also character reading experiments. Then we can come back to the circle a little bit later. Of course, there are limitations for such studies. We use the isolated syllables for tone perception. We also, during the tone perception experiment, we neutralized all secondary cues for tones. We know the pitch pattern is the primary cue for tone. The duration in test profile also contribute to tone perception, but we neutralize them. For the character reading experiment, we just use single characters or single symbols. However, during daily communication, we usually do not process each syllable individually, and where we can have lots of top-down processing, prediction. Right? Based on the context, we can predict the following words. So here is a citation from this paper. In center normal easy conversations, at least, one may interpret the meaning of an utterance directly from the global sound pattern. Reference to formal linguistic units of analysis, such as phonemes, words, and grammar, is incidental. So some studies have limitations, but we have to move on. Then we come back to these slides. Okay, so we see, and more or less confirmed by these studies, the language will influence our brain. Different language shapes different brains. And then different brain produce different perceptions, and the different perception are further reflected by different behaviors. And what's more, so far from this study, we know most of the psychological models include brain models actually are based on the wealthy people. What's the wealthy people? It's the Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic countries. Specifically, North America, Europe, Australia, Israel, etc. And this means that 96% of psychological samples come from countries with only 12% of the world's population. So the psychological models based on the such populations cannot be generalized to the world's population. So This gives lots of room for us to pursue how to change language, including minority languages in and around the Greater China area, to look at the interaction between the language, brain, and the cognition. So this is Acknowledgements, our work as supported by several funding agencies. And thank you. So any questions? Also, you can email me later if you have something you want to discuss with me, and even you want to examine, for instance, here for the character ranking experiments, we used the Mandarin group, the simplified transit character reader versus Hong Kong people, the traditional transit character reader. But actually, in addition to the rating system, there are also quite a lot other difference. For instance, the pedagogical is different. So in mainland, everyone actually are taught by Peng at the primary school. We know how each character are pronounced. But in Hong Kong, things may be different. This is also a factor. Moreover, in Hong Kong, lots of textbooks actually are in English, in Mandarin, from primary school to middle school, except the English courses or other textbooks actually are in Chinese. So we can see actually the simple transit character readers actually have more exposure to the trend ratings, right? And Hong Kong and relatively less. But this also influenced the result. So we in the first experiments. Then you may be thinking, okay, Taiwan, the pedagogical may be more close to mainland. Lot of the textbooks are also based on the trains. So I will be more close. So we can pick apart those factors if we design this experiment later. So if you are interested in this direction, you can email me, you can come to talk with me, and to discuss all such possibilities. Okay, even though